For more on how markets reacted to hopes for de-escalation, let's bring in Matt Gertken, chief geopolitical strategist at BCA, an independent research firm. Matt, great to have you with us. Are markets underpricing what is going on in the Middle East, or have we seen the worst of this conflict for now?
Well, thanks very much, Melissa. It's not clear that we've seen the worst. I would be quite skeptical. These are major events building up from structural tensions in the region and in Iran and between Iran and Israel. We've had generational change in the leadership across several of the Gulf Arab states, and we see that happening in some other Western countries. But there has not been a generational change in the Iranian regime or in Israel, for that matter. And so we're still seeing hardline and hawkish leaders. Israel now will be front and center. The U.S. president will have to put some pressure on them and really discipline Israel to ensure that this doesn't escalate any further. And I'm not convinced that will happen. I think, in fact, Israel will continue to fight the fight, and that could very well provoke Iran to take more actions.
Hey, Matt, peace and harmony, that's not something that's existed in the Middle East probably in thousands of years. So when the president of the United States suggests this, what you just said about Israel, I don't know how Israel comes to term with a major tenet of the Iranian government's view about the Israel is the death to Israel. So we're probably a ways off from peace and harmony, wouldn't you suggest?
Well, there's got to be a damage assessment, of what's actually happened. If Israel is satisfied that Iran is permanently off the path of a nuclear weapon, then they could probably listen to the president and say, okay, it's time to shift to negotiations. But the truth is the Iranians have taken the approach that they can weather the storm. They can sustain really severe attacks. They've moved around the enriched uranium. They've got the same regime in place that they think can survive and can suppress social unrest that will probably stem from these attacks ultimately. And so that means that we'll have a regime that's much more hardened in its conviction. It'll still have some of the intelligence and talent necessary, and it'll still be getting help over the years from Russia and China. So there will, from Israel's point of view, there's still a very good reason to continue to press against critical infrastructure, undermine this regime, and keep the Americans entangled.
Matt, the move in crude oil suggests today's retaliation maybe takes closing the straits off the table. Do you believe that, or is that sort of a little bit getting ahead of ourselves?
It's getting ahead of ourselves. It's not entirely off the table. Closing the Strait of Hormuz was always something that would only happen if the Iranians were convinced that the regime was absolutely going down and they had no other choice. But that could still happen if we had a series of bad events and a downward spiral. What that requires is effectively the way that would play out. Either the Iranians were faking it today and they're about to retaliate in a bigger way, or Israel could strike some of their own capacities. For example, Israel could strike their ability to export oil abroad, and then they would start to retaliate against regional oil infrastructure, and the U.S. would get involved and things could escalate from there. Or just the lack of trust between the U.S. and Iran. If at any point the Iranians look like they might make a move to mine the strait or take out some ships, or if the Americans look like they might try to preempt Iran and remove their ability to do that, then it could cause those itchy trigger fingers to move, and we could end up with a crisis that was a miscalculation. So there's several ways in which this could still be on the table, but it is admittedly a lower probability now than it was, just a day ago.
Hey, Matt, so therefore, as a geopolitical strategist, what is either your highest probability negative major vol event out there? What aren't we thinking about? I understand that this is a complex geopolitical dynamic, but again, and maybe this is the wrong day to be looking at other parts of the world, but where are you most concerned? Because right now, this looked like it could have been a bad situation that at least as of the end of the day, the VIX is down, volatility is lower, markets went higher.
Yeah, it's extraordinary what's happened today, but we have to realize it's an issue of time. What I've charted for 3 years is this destabilization of the Middle East. The Middle East was not able to produce its own balance of power. It really, and that's the norm, perennial, but the Americans need to get involved and be the actor that arbitrates and fixes a balance of power that usually is pretty precarious anyway. And it's when you're living through these kind of sequences, there's a fog of war. Things change on a daily basis. The market mood shifts really rapidly. What we know is that Israel is determined to deal a really significant blow to this regime that could ultimately make it very hard for the regime to survive because of social unrest stemming from their sclerotic economy, which will now be weakened. And we also know the Iranians are intending to survive and build back better in a way that would perpetuate the conflict. And we know that the U.S. will intervene. So I think what that tells us is we're not having a deal in the Middle East that unleashes Iranian reserves and creates peace and stability and a balance of power. We're still in an unstable environment, and over a period of months, that could continue to influence the markets in a way that would cause a risk premium in the oil price and would help to foment some of the fears of stagflation.